Davey D, we are back here. We were able to get out this win and get to another spot. We've been talking with lawyer, activist, lobbyist, and Llano. We're in Texas this afternoon about the Supreme Court decision. One of the things that I know work has been done around people that you roll with has been looking at judges. I often tell people that a couple of years ago, or a year ago in the 2008 election, something historic happened in this state, which was all but 4 judges were voted out of office in the Houston-Harris County area, which was very significant because people took a look, realized that there was a problem with judges and the type of powers that they were having, and said, let's have a clean slate. When I look at the power of judges, I see that Sean Bell, the decision to let the cops go was granted by a judge that was appointed by, I believe, Bush Sr. When we look at the trial of Oscar Grant, we see that the judge that is overseeing that is somebody that was appointed by Governor Pete Wilson, conservative governor. When we look at the Supreme Court decisions, we find that all the people that made those choices, starting with Alioto, was appointed by Reagan, Clarence Thomas by Bush Sr., Roberts, who really led this charge, by Bush Jr. And then we start looking at the 2000 election and realize that the whole 8 years of his presidency was granted by these judges who 20 years and 10 years and 15 years after the fact are able to rule on issues that have an impact for years to come. With that in mind, the significance of judges, how we need to look at them, the roles that they play, and the people that appoint them, what sort of things would you add to that?
You're so right about that. The judges are important to us. I was part of a program here in Austin, in Southwest Keys. We had, on the east side of Austin, which is where most people of color live, we had judicial forums in the last couple months where we invite the public in to meet and ask the judges questions, the candidates for judge. A lot of people don't realize how big of a difference it makes, one person versus another on the court. It's funny, David, because I practiced law in court for 8 years until I finally realized, maybe a little late, I'm a slow learner, everything in this room is getting channeled around and decided by politics, not by the law. It's kind of funny how people, if you haven't seen it with your own eyes, you want to believe that we're a nation of laws. But really, we're a nation of politics. And whoever wins the votes sets the laws and the rules and interprets the laws and the rules. So voters, all of us need to realize, if I have a vision, and that vision is, we do wake up as citizens. We wake up and we take our power back. We lost a lot of power yesterday. It ended up losing yesterday, but we were really losing it for a few years before that as it got all set up for yesterday. The bowling pins fell yesterday, but it was being set up by Republicans, frankly, for a good 10, 20 years before that to get that final pin down. The funny thing I thought yesterday was Senator John Cornyn from Texas saying it's no big deal, when he knows good and well that the people he's been involved with have been setting this decision up for 20 years, because now they know they're going to be able to take advantage of this. So judges do so much more than just read a book and interpret the law down, blind. Justice is not blind. It's all politics.
So when you have a judge and you're putting on your lawyer hat, they can decide what sort of things get to be spoken about in a court. For example, I guess the whole case around Mumia, which was another Supreme Court decision that was made, which, basically fast-tracked them to death. We were looking at the judge that was involved in his case and him not allowing evidence to come in and all this other stuff. Judge Sabo was his name. So from a lawyer standpoint, it really is that big of a difference when you walk in there and you have a judge who leans one way politically versus another?
Look, it's night and day. We were talking yesterday in Houston with a new criminal justice coordinator. As you mentioned, in Houston, what we had was, before November 2008, all Republican felony court judges. Harris County in Houston is so big, they have between 15 and 20 courts sending people to prison all day, every day in the felony courts. Last year in November, those were almost 100% swept out and Democrats put in. We went to talk to the Harris County Criminal Justice Coordinator yesterday, who said the judges called her in and said, how can we change this policy so that we're no longer sending nonviolent drug users to prison? We're not willing to do it anymore, and we're going to switch it across the board.
So this is the difference between having hanging judges to judges that wanted to look at it differently.
Exactly. The voters changed the judges, and now we're going to have fewer people rotting away in prison for no reason here in Texas. Harris County was sending about half of all of the drug offenders into our Texas prisons. And so from the voters standing up and making a change, it's going to radically change, because more people will be able to heal from their drug addiction in the community, be home for their children, be home for their nieces and nephews, work, support families. It's going to make a real difference on the street.
With that in mind now, and people starting to get educated on judges, and I just want to add, because I know the work that you were doing, there was a concerted effort and a target to educate people on the process of judges versus just looking at Barack Obama running for office. But hey, do you know what these people do or don't do made a difference? But now with corporations now being able to siphon money, will that impact judges? Will judges basically who get appointed, or in this case, in some states they're elected, they will actually be able to be backed up by corporations? That seems to be a conflict of interest right there.
I would ask people in the rest of the country to take a little look over after yesterday's decision at the Texas Supreme Court. In Texas, we have two different high courts. One is for criminal cases, one for civil. Texas Supreme Court is the highest court for civil cases. I have been getting an email for some 10, 15 years that every time the court comes out with a decision, I'll get an email and I'll get to see what they decided. Well, they were taken over by corporate interests years ago, and that's why I think the country should look at the Texas Supreme Court. I think it's been about 7 or 8 years since I got an email saying a citizen won in that court. The corporation wins every single time. I can predict it because it is almost 100% true. I have yet to remember an email that told me the Texas Supreme Court came out with a decision where it was a citizen versus a corporation, the citizen won. It's stopped happening. And it can be, people have traced the money from the donations to the judges straight through to the decisions in favor of those corporations. It's all laid out on paper here in Texas. So I think people should take a good look at that.
And, I think it's befitting that we're here to talk about it, because half those Supreme Court judges that made the decisions were appointed by people from this state, Walker and Herbert.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, y'all. That's all I can say. I'm sorry. And it's not all like that down here. And we've got a lot more going on. Yesterday's going to make it a lot harder. The truth of the matter is, every Supreme Court decision can be overturned. And
what's the process for that?
It's a long process, just like it was a long process them building up to where they got what they got yesterday. It's a matter of people becoming educated. If things are affecting you in your life, if things are not easy for you right now in your life, it's probably because of politics. It's probably because certain people got in charge and made decisions that now come down and affect your everyday life. And if we use our tools that we have to communicate with one another, which are cheap, like the internet, maximize those tools, band together, look around what's going on with you, and start talking to your brothers and sisters and fellow community members, even those far away. And if we all start really researching and educating and standing up and taking our part of voting and listening and tell each other who the right candidates are. Maybe I have time to go to one judicial forum. Maybe you have time to go to another forum about state reps. Tell me who you thought was the people's choice. I'll tell you who I thought was the people's choice. Let's compare notes on this. Populism can rise up again. It's just going to take a lot of hard work with all this money coming down and raining down against us. But it can be done, in theory.